of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I give him the floor.
Madam President, allow me to make a brief introduction before the briefings of my colleagues. Excellencies, there are moments when the choices before us are not just consequential, they are defining. Moments when the direction taken will shape not only the fate of nations, but potentially our collective future. This is such a moment. To the parties to the conflict, the potential parties to the conflict, and to the Security Council as the representative of the international community, I have a simple and clear message. Give peace a chance. The confrontation between Israel and Iran is escalating rapidly with a terrible toll, killing and injuring civilians, devastating homes, neighborhoods and civilian infrastructure, and attacking nuclear facilities. The world is watching with growing alarm. We are not drifting toward crisis. We are racing toward it. We are not witnessing isolated incidents. We are on course to potential chaos. The expansion of this conflict could ignite a fire that no one can control. We must not let that happen. Excellencies, it may be easy to list a range of problems that have impacted relations between Israel and Iran in the last decades. But the central question of this conflict is the nuclear question. Non-proliferation is a must for the safety and security of us all. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a cornerstone of international security. Iran must respect it. And Iran has repeatedly stated that it is not seeking nuclear weapons. But let's recognize there is a trust gap. The only way to bridge that gap is through diplomacy to establish a credible, comprehensible, and verifiable solution, including full access to inspectors of the IAEA as the United Nations technical agency in this field. For all of that to be possible, I appeal for an end to the fighting and the return to serious negotiations. At this defining moment, I urge this Council to act with unity and urgency for dialogue. And I urge the international community to rally behind the sole path that can deliver lasting peace, diplomacy, grounded in international law, including the UN Charter. This is even more crucial given the unfolding horrors in Gaza. Excellencies, the only thing that is predictable is that the consequences of continuing this conflict are unpredictable. Let us not look back on this decisive moment with regret. Let us act responsibly and together to pull the region and our world back from the brink. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his remarks. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemarie DiCarlo.
Thank you, Madam President. We meet as the scope and scale of attacks in Iran and Israel continue to widen, with grave consequences for civilians in both countries. In Iran, Israel claims to have targeted over 100 military sites and nuclear facilities, including the Kermanshah missile base, the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities, and the Kondab, former Iraq, heavy water reactor. At the same time, government buildings, homes, and residential neighborhoods, factories, hospitals, airports, and refineries have been stuck in and around Tehran, Isfahan, Tabriz, Avaz, and among many other cities. The bombing on 17 June of Iran's state-run television channel during a live broadcast marked a chilling moment. Residents of Tehran and other cities have received warnings to evacuate on more than one occasion. Iran has closed its airspace until further notice and has shut some border crossings. In Israel, residential neighborhoods and essential infrastructure have been hit throughout the country, notably in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Bat Yam, Dimona, Petah Tikva, and Eilat. Several civilian sites have been directly impacted by Iran's airstrikes, including the Weizmann Research Institute in Rehovot, the Bazan Petrochemical Complex in Haifa, and yesterday, the Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba. A state of national emergency remains in place, with severe restrictions on air travel. Several areas in the occupied West Bank have also been impacted, and checkpoints and road closures are impacting movement, especially for Palestinians. Throughout the region, airspace remains severely constrained by these exchanges, not only within Iran and Israel, but also throughout Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and beyond. The intensifying cycle of attacks and counterattacks has resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties, including fatalities in both Iran and Israel. According to Iran's Ministry of Health, as of 19 June, 224 people had been killed and more than 2,500 others injured in Israeli strikes across Iran. The Health Ministry added that 90% of the victims were civilians. Other estimates, based on local non-governmental organizations and human rights groups, suggest the death toll is at least double the official figure. In addition, there have been over 20 high-ranking Iranian military leaders killed, notably the Commander and Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, the IRGC Commander-in-Chief, and IRGC Intelligence Chief, as well as several nuclear scientists. We've also received reports of significant displacement out of Tehran, a city of over 12 million residents, resulting in massive traffic jams. Fuel shortages are leading to long queues at patrol stations, sometimes for over 5 hours, further hampering movement. And still, many remain trapped in their homes in Tehran with nowhere to flee. In the absence of bomb shelters on air raid sirens in the city and widespread internet blackouts, further strikes are bound to harm more civilians. In Israel, the Office of the Prime Minister stated that, as of 19 June, Iran's strikes have killed 24 people and injured 915 others, the vast majority civilians. The strikes have also damaged homes, leading to the displacement of Israelis. Madam President, we are teetering on the edge of a full-blown conflict and a humanitarian crisis. International humanitarian law must be respected, including the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in attack. Attacks directed against civilians and civilian objects and indiscriminate attacks are strictly prohibited. Medical personnel and medical facilities, including hospitals, must be respected and protected. We are witnessing in real time the impact of the conflict regionally, with missile launches by the Houthis in Yemen toward Israel and heightened tensions involving armed groups in Iraq. With each passing day of fighting, the danger, particularly for civilians, grows. Interceptions and explosives falling short have been reported over Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria, sending debris into populated areas, sowing fear and uncertainty. Any further expansion of the conflict could have enormous consequences for the region and for international peace and security at large. The fallout of the conflict is also economic. We cannot discount the global impact of a potential disruption of trade through the Strait of Hormuz, described by the World Bank as the world's most critical oil passageway. Trade through this vital route has already fallen by 15% amid heightened tensions starting in late 2023. Madam President, International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Grossi will address this Council shortly. Allow me at this juncture to express our appreciation to the IAEA and its staff still on the ground in Iran. We also convey our deepest gratitude to our colleagues who have continued to stay and deliver. At the center of the ongoing conflict are concerns about Iran's nuclear program. As the Secretary General has stated, the best way to address these concerns is through dialogue leading to a negotiated solution. But the window to prevent a catastrophic escalation and achieve a peaceful resolution has not yet closed, as demonstrated by positive recent openings for diplomacy. We welcome in this regard the talks between the foreign ministers of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Iran in Geneva today. We strongly encourage such efforts. We must pursue every possible opportunity to de-escalate, to cease the hostilities, to settle disputes by peaceful means. The charter that binds all of us mandates it. The imperative for diplomacy has seldom been greater. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. Di Carlo for her briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Secretary General, dear Madam Under-Secretary General, dear friends. Attacks on nuclear sites in the Islamic Republic of Iran have caused a sharp degradation in nuclear safety and security in Iran. Though they have not so far led to a radiological release affecting the public, there is a danger this could occur. The IAEA has been monitoring closely the situation at Iran's nuclear sites since Israel began its attacks a week ago. As part of its mission, the IAEA is the global nerve center for information on nuclear and radiological safety, and we can respond to any nuclear or radiological emergency. Based on information available to the IAEA, the following is the current situation at Iran's nuclear sites, which I offer as a follow-up to my most recent report to this Security Council. The Natanz enrichment site contains two facilities. The first is the main fuel enrichment plant. The initial attacks on the 13th of June targeted and destroyed electricity infrastructure at the facility, including an electrical substation, the main electric power supply building, an emergency power supply, and backup generators. On the same day, the main cascade hall appears to have been attacked using ground-penetrating munitions. Second facility at Natanz is the pilot fuel enrichment plant. It consists of above-ground and underground cascade halls. On the 13th of June, the above-ground part was functionally destroyed, and the strikes on the underground cascade halls were seriously damaging. The level of radioactivity outside the Natanz site has remained unchanged and at normal levels, indicating no external radiological impact on the population or the environment there. However, within the Natanz facility, there is both radiological and chemical contamination. It is possible that uranium isotopes contained in uranium hexafluoride, uranyl fluoride, and hydrogen fluoride are dispersed inside the facility. The radiation, primarily consisting of alpha particles, poses a significant danger if inhaled or digested. This risk can be effectively managed with appropriate protective measures, such as using respiratory devices. The main concern inside the facility is chemical toxicity. Fordow is Iran's main enrichment location for enriching uranium at 60%. The agency is not aware of any damage at Fordow at this time. At the Esfahan nuclear site, 4 buildings were damaged in last Friday's attack: the Central Chemical Laboratory, a uranium conversion plant, the Tehran reactor fuel manufacturing plant, and the enriched uranium metal processing facility, which was under construction. No increase of off-site radiation levels was reported. In Natanz, the main concern here is chemical toxicity. The Conda heavy water research reactor under construction in Arak was hit on the 19th of June. As the reactor was not operational and it did not contain any nuclear material, no radiological consequence is expected. The nearby heavy water production plant is also assessed to have been hit. And similarly, no radiological consequence is expected. As stated in the IEA's update of 18th June, at the Tehran Research Center, one building where advanced centrifuge rotors were manufactured and tested was hit. At the Karaj workshop, two buildings where different centrifuge components were manufactured were destroyed. There was no radiological impact internally or externally. Let me now refer to the Bushehr nuclear power plant. This is the nuclear site in Iran where the consequences of an attack could be most serious. It is an operating nuclear power plant, and as such, it hosts thousands of kilograms of nuclear material. Countries of the region have reached out directly to me over the past few hours to express their concerns, and I want to make it absolutely and completely clear. In case of an attack on the Bushehr nuclear power plant, a direct hit would result in a very high release of radioactivity to the environment. Similarly, a hit that disabled the only two lines supplying electrical power to the plant could cause its reactor's core to melt, which could result in a high release of radioactivity to the environment. In the worst case, both scenarios would necessitate protective actions, such as evacuations and sheltering of the population, or the need to take stable iodine with a reach extending to distances from a few to several hundred kilometers. Radiation monitoring would need to cover distances of several hundred kilometers, and food restrictions may need to be implemented. Any action against the Tehran nuclear research reactor could also have severe consequences, potentially for large areas of the city of Tehran and its inhabitants. In such a case, protective actions would need to be taken. I continue to provide public updates about the developments at all these sites and their possible health and environmental consequences. The agency is, as Madam Undersecretary had kindly reminded, is and will remain present in Iran, and inspections there will resume as required by Iran's safeguards obligations under its NPT safeguards agreement as soon as safety and security conditions allow. In this context, let me restate that the safety of our inspectors is of utmost importance. The host country has a responsibility in this regard, and we expect every effort to be made to ensure that their security and their communication lines with the IAEA headquarters will be maintained. As stated in my most recent report to the agency's Board of Governors, and based on inspections conducted at the relevant facilities since then, Iran's uranium stockpiles remain under safeguards in accordance with Iran's comprehensive safeguards agreement. You may recall that more than 400 kilograms of this stockpile is uranium enriched up to 60% of uranium-235. It is essential that the agency resumes inspections as soon as possible to provide credible assurances that none of it has been diverted. Importantly, any special measures by Iran to protect its nuclear material and equipment must be done in accordance with Iran's safeguards obligation and the agency. Therefore, it is of paramount importance that the agency's inspectors are allowed to verify that all relevant materials, especially those enriched to 60%, are accounted for. Beyond the potential radiological risks, attacks on such materials would make this effort, of course, more difficult. Madam President, the IAEA has consistently underlined, as stated in its General Conference resolutions, that armed attacks on nuclear facilities should never take place and could result in radioactive releases with great consequences within and beyond the boundaries of the state which has been attacked. I therefore again call on maximum restraint. Military escalation threatens lives and delays indispensable work towards a diplomatic solution for the long-term assurance that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. Madam President, the presence, support, analysis and inspections of technical experts are crucial to mitigating risks to nuclear safety and security. That is true during peacetime and even more so during military conflict. For the second time in 3 years, we are witnessing a dramatic conflict between two UN and IAEA member states in which nuclear installations are coming under fire and nuclear safety is being compromised. The IAEA, just as has been the case with the military conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, will not stand idle during this conflict. As I stated in this chamber just a few days ago, I am ready to travel immediately and to engage with all relevant parties to help ensure the protection of nuclear facilities and the continued peaceful use of nuclear technology in accordance with the agency mandate, including by deploying agency nuclear safety and security experts, in addition to our safeguards inspectors in Iran, wherever necessary. For the IAEA to act, a constructive professional dialogue is needed. I urge the members of this council to support us in making it happen sooner rather than later. The IAEA must receive timely and regular technical information about affected nuclear facilities and their respective sites. I urge in this regard the Iranian regulatory authorities to continue a constructive dialogue with the IAEA Incident and Emergency Center, which has been operating 24/7 since the beginning of this conflict. Nuclear facilities and material must not be shrouded by the fog of war. Yesterday, there was an incorrect statement to the media by an Israeli military official that the Bushehr nuclear power plant had been attacked. Though the mistake was quickly identified and the statement retracted, the situation underscored the vital need for clear and accurate communication, and the agency's unique role in providing it in a technically accurate and politically impartial way is obvious. Let me conclude by assuring the international community of the IAEA's continued support at this very grave time. A diplomatic solution is within reach if the necessary political will is there. Elements for an agreement have been discussed. The IAEA can guarantee through a watertight inspection system that nuclear weapons will not be developed in Iran. They can form the basis of a long-standing agreement that brings peace and avoids a nuclear crisis in the Middle East. This opportunity should not be missed. The alternative would be a protracted conflict and a looming threat of nuclear proliferation, that, while emanating from the Middle East, would effectively erode the NPT and the non-proliferation regime as a whole. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Grossi for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, I thank you for convening this emergency open meeting. I thank Secretary General Guterres for his statement and support his call for an end to the fighting and the return to diplomatic negotiations. I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. As the Israel-Iran military conflict enters its 8th day, it is distressing to note that it has resulted in a large number of civilian casualties and damage to facilities on both sides. If the conflict escalates further, not only will both sides suffer greater losses, but the regional countries will also be severely affected. Israel's actions violate international law and the norms of international relations, jeopardize sovereignty and security of Iran, and undermine regional peace and stability. China unequivocally condemns this. Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward a 4-point proposal regarding the current situation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has spoken separately with his counterparts of Iran, Israel, and the regional countries. At this critical juncture, the international community should further forge a consensus and make every effort to promote talks to ease tension. I will make 4 points. First, there must be an immediate ceasefire and an end to fighting. The use of force is not the right way to resolve international disputes. It will only exacerbate hatred and conflicts. The sooner a ceasefire is put in place, the less damage will be done. The situation in the region cannot be allowed to slide into an unknown abyss. The parties to the conflict, Israel in particular, should cease fire as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating and to avoid any spillover of the war. Second, the safety of civilians must be ensured. The red line of protecting civilians in armed conflicts must not be crossed at any time, and the indiscriminate use of force is unacceptable. The parties to the conflict must strictly abide by international law, resolutely avoid harming innocent civilians, refrain from attacking civilian facilities, and facilitate the evacuation of third country nationals. Third, we must stay committed to dialogue and negotiation. Communication and dialogue are the right paths to lasting peace. The current conflict has interrupted the negotiation process on the Iranian nuclear issue. The attacks on multiple Iranian nuclear facilities set a dangerous precedent and could have catastrophic consequences. We must not waver in the general direction of a political settlement to the Iranian nuclear issue, and we must persist in returning the Iranian nuclear issue to the track of a political solution through dialogue and negotiation. China welcomes the talk in Geneva among foreign ministers of UK, France, Germany, and the High Representative of EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and the Foreign Minister of Iran. Fourth, we must bring together the efforts of the international community to promote peace. Without stability in the Middle East, peace in the world would be elusive. The Israel-Iran conflict has led to a sudden escalation of tension in the Middle East and has also had a serious impact on global security. Recently, 21 Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint statement of foreign ministers calling for a ceasefire, resuming talks on the Iranian nuclear issue, and maintaining lasting peace in the region, which China fully supports. The international community, especially major countries with special influence on the parties to the conflict, should make efforts to cool down the situation rather than the opposite. The Security Council, as the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, should play a greater role in this regard. We support the Council in taking necessary actions in a timely fashion. China stands ready to continue to strengthen communication and coordination with all relevant parties, build synergies, uphold justice, and play a constructive role in restoring peace in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Secretary General Guterres for his presence and thoughtful and compelling remarks. Secretary General, you spoke about a defining moment and our collective future, as well as collective responsibility. And we fully agree with you and your call to give peace a chance. And in that context, your appeal to end the fighting and return to negotiations. I'm also thankful to Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her complimentary briefing, as well as the briefing by Director General Grossi. We note in particular his view that diplomatic solution is within reach with necessary political will. Madam President, last Friday, the Council had an emergency session in the wake of Israel's military strikes, violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran in flagrant violation and contravention of the UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. 1 week later, as a result of such irresponsible behavior, the situation has only exacerbated, with grave implications for regional and international peace and security. Pakistan strongly condemns the unjustified and illegitimate aggression by Israel. We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. We unequivocally denounce the blatant attacks and military strikes carried out by Israel, which constitute a grave danger and a serious threat to the peace, security, and stability of the entire region and beyond, with serious implications. We offer our sincere condolences and sympathies to the brotherly people of Iran on the loss of life as a result of these unprovoked attacks. The ensuing humanitarian crisis and civilian toll on both sides is also deplorable. International humanitarian law must be complied by all sides. The attacks against nuclear facilities for peaceful purposes are deeply troubling. Such attacks contravene international law, the Charter of the UN, Statute of the IAEA, and relevant IAEA General Conference resolutions on the issue. It is the responsibility of the IAEA to clearly pronounce its legal position with regard to such attacks, as well as to report it to the Board of Governors and to the Security Council about the legal safeguards, safety and security implications of such attacks. The agency should fulfill that responsibility. Madam President, the latest crisis has aggravated the existing tensions in the region, arising from Israel's continuing ruthless assault on Gaza that has resulted in an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe for the innocent Palestinians, as well as its recurring violations of international law in Syria, Lebanon, and the Security Council bears primary responsibility to immediately stop this violation and hold the aggressor accountable for its actions. The Security Council must fulfill its duty and affirm the following. First, categorical and condemnation of Israel's attacks on the Islamic Republic of Iran since 13th of June and all actions that contravene in law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Second, play its and promote de-escalation for achieving a comprehensive ceasefire before the situation spirals out of control and threatens the peace and stability of the entire region. Third, clear denunciation of the targeting of IAEA safeguarded nuclear facilities against the provisions of international law and the UN Charter as reflected in the UN Security Council resolutions, IAEA resolutions and international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions. The Security Council must implement its own resolution 487. Fourth, call for dialogue and diplomacy to promote a peaceful and lasting resolution of the crisis. Diplomacy given a chance. Madam President, regrettably, Israeli unlawful strikes against Iran came at the time of intense engagement on Iran's nuclear issue. These illegals must not be allowed to that dialogue. Parties must swiftly return to the path of negotiations, which is the only viable means to reach a sustained agreement regarding the Iranian nuclear program. We note the willingness expressed by the United States to keep the door for negotiations open. We take note of the dialogue between the E3 and Iran. We hope that the diplomatic efforts and engagements will be